The Hawk That Dare Not Hunt by Day by Scott Odell, Chapter 22. The storm struck us when we were 8 leagues northeast of Ramsgate, close upon the sands. We had sailed until nightfall with the wind astern, but near 1 a.m, the wind freshened and shifted to our starboard beam. At once the ship heeled hard to port, the shrouds hummed, and great dollops of gray water came aboard. The water sluiced down the deck, too much for the scuppers. It piled up against the bulwarks and went roaring over the side. Uncle Jack gave orders to reef, but not more than a handful of canvas came in, and we went on our way. He stood at the break of the roundhouse, where he had a forward view of the ship, shouting commands to our meager crew and sending me on errands fore and aft. He sent me everywhere except aloft. He ran my legs off, and he gave me no time to think about the storm or of anything else. A black wave came crashing aboard, and suddenly we stood knee-deep in a tide of violent water. "The Bibles!" Uncle Jack shouted. "The Bibles!" I knew what he meant. Snatching a light from the cabin, I sloshed across the deck. My sea boots filled with water, and stumbling headlong, made my way down the companionway into the noisy darkness of the hold. Here below, the sounds of the wind and crashing seas faded to a whisper, but there were other sounds. The planking creaked, cargo rustled as it shifted gently with the roll of the ship. It was like being on the inside of a drum. I shone my lantern overhead along the oaken deck beams and knees. There was no sign of running water anywhere. The books were stored in a secret place built by Grandfather Jeremiah. In our town of Danfield, everyone was a smuggler. Indeed, our town was famous for miles around, all along the coasts of Essex and Kent, for its smuggling. Grandfather Jeremiah had built the secret place for my father, where the mainmast rested hard upon the keel. At this spot, around the butt of the mast, he had built a compartment 4 feet high and 7 feet square. It was timbered with heavy oak and made to look as if it supported the mast, but one side was fitted carefully, like the drawer of a cabinet, with wooden pins. When you removed them, one side of the compartment revealed the secret storing place. I drew out the pins, let the heavy timber down, and shone the lantern inside. The compartment was dry and smelled of ink. The barrels and packs were also dry and had not shifted. I put the timber back in place, once again shone the lantern along the planking overhead, and went on deck to report to Uncle Jack. "She's dry as a bone," I told him. Stiff with salt, his beard glittered in the lantern light. "Praise the Lord," he shouted. "And also Grandfather Jeremiah," I shouted back to him against the howl of the wind. The wind slacked off toward morning, though the seas still ran high. We took one roaring wave aboard that set us up on our beam ends, but the ship, with a long-drawn moan of hissing water and whistling cordage, the cries of long-dead sailors, shook it off and rightened herself once more. The day dawned clear and almost windless, with a pink horizon and one low cloud that followed us into the Medway. We had planned to enter the river in darkness before dawn, but the storm had sped us on. We had no choice except to sail clear of the mouth of the Thames, where we could expect to encounter a searcher. Searchers seldom ventured as far up the Medway as the town of Danfield. They sometimes nosed around outside the entrance where the 2 rivers met, but since the morning that one of them was seized, carried aboard by a fisherman, and deposited miles away on a lonely islet to find his way back to London as best as he could, searchers mostly stayed off the Medway and out of the town of Danfield. Our pier, with its crooked piling and ragged deck, had a broken-down look, which we encouraged so as to avert suspicion that it was ever used. A winding, weed-grown path led to an old Roman watchtower. To further allay suspicion, we kept scythes, shears, plows, and a pile of harness in the tower. Under the pile of harness were heavy paving stones, and under the stones was a stone trap door, which led by a winding stairs to a large storage room. Thither that night we brought Tyndale's Bibles. 3 nights later, we loaded the crates and barrels of Bibles into a cart and started west on the long journey to London, leading 2 horses and a milk cow to give us the appearance of farmers on the way to the market. We traveled mostly by day and slept under the cart on straw. We later fed to the horses. On the morning of the 3rd day, having passed through the town of Greenwich, we were waved off the road by outriders on spangled horses carrying 2 immense gilded crosses. From the weed-choked ditch where we sought refuge, we crouched and watched the procession go by. Behind the cross-bearers and 6 yeomen carrying pikes and other weapons came a mule, and astride it, a fat little man who Uncle Jack said was Cardinal Wolsey. "He rides a mule," my uncle said, "to show us, the simple folk, that he is also a simple man of simple wants. But notice, Tom, that his cloak has a fur collar, and the mule is harnessed with gilded leather and gold chains." Gold chains, fur on the man's collar. What do you make of that, eh? "I make out that he is a rich man." Uncle Jack snorted. "Richer than the king. Palaces everywhere, here and there. Likely he's on his way now to one of those. And riding a mule, just to fool us, eh?" I started to count the reeves and courtiers and retainers, all mounted on fine horses, who followed the fat man on the gold-laden mule. Then I began to count the yeomen and soldiers, some riding, some marching. Then 3 varlets came by, driving a flock of sheep and 6 oxen. Then 4 men passed, carrying 3 dead, trussed-up deer. Then came a cart filled with crates of partridges and pheasants. "He eats well," Uncle Jack said. "I am told he serves 20 courses at a dinner, and all on gold plates, mind you. Fine fare, eh?" The procession stretched out for a mile and more. Men and perfumed women, jewels flashing, banners cracking in the morning breeze, and flutes squealing, drums beating. I watched the procession go by, counting to myself. At 657, I grew tired and quit. Uncle Jack said, "What's in the barrels and crates behind us here will put an end to all of this. He's doomed, this Wolsey and his like. And Tyndale's Bible will have a great part in that dooming. Doomed, I tell you, Tom, and good riddance, eh?" We got our cart out of the ditch and back on the high road and resumed the journey. As we jolted our way toward London, the crates and barrels creaking behind us, I wondered about Uncle Jack's prophecy, doubting that it would ever really come to pass. End of chapter 22.